Hello YouTube. There is a lot of talk nowadays about UFOs in Iran, and I want to tell you and present some information about Soviet encounters with UFOs at the Iranian border. When the USSR existed, the two countries, they had a mutual border, and I want to start my narrative with the events of the second part of the 20th century. Years ago, I had a great contact who himself was a part of the Soviet UFO history. His name was Lev Ovsischer. He was a top Soviet pilot, a Top Gun. World War II veteran. He was a tough and determined person. He was well known, and he achieved much despite Soviet state anti-Semitism. Colonel Ovsischer eventually moved to Israel when he was able to do so, and in Israel he became an honorary aviator. I recall his stories about the UFOs that he had personally observed over Poland in 1944, but he also collected information about Soviet Air Force and their encounters with UFOs. Colonel Ovsischer and Veniamin Dodin, that's the person who observed and recorded the 1953 incident over the taiga. And please see my video about it. It was one of the most interesting cases. Well, Ovsischer and Dodin, they recall the tragic events of the 1960s. Because the incident is still classified, few details are available. It took place in the area of the Soviet borders with Iran and Afghanistan. 6 modern Soviet aircraft were destroyed and 12 pilots perished. Apparently it was a UFO attack, but who attacked first? We do not know. Now, the directive issued by the Supreme Commander of the Soviet Air Defense Forces, dated 1965, absolutely prohibited for the Soviet forces to fire on or initiate any military action against unidentified flying objects. The Soviets were faced with the presence of UFOs in the areas of top secret tests of nuclear bombs, missiles, rockets, new technologies, and weapons systems. The Soviet Minister of Defense issued a ban on such demonstrations of firepower and mentioned the previous ban that obviously was not obeyed. So there was one predating the 1960s ban, and I've covered it in my books and so forth. Please understand that I brought up as much information as possible about Soviet ufology and military interactions, but there is so much more we just don't know about. Well, anyway, after 1978, the Soviet military became more efficient when it came to UFO observations and data collection, and shooting at least one of them down. And I urge you to see the link to my video about this alleged incident of 1978 that took place in Central Asia. Very interesting case. Now, let's look at someone who flew in the area. Very outspoken person. In November of 2005, remember the year by the way, in November of 2005, retired Colonel Alexander Akimenkov was one of the speakers at the annual Russian UFO conference, Zigulevsky Chтения. The former test pilot presented a very detailed lecture about his experiences with UFO encounters during Soviet testing of new weapons in the Asian regions of the USSR. He recalled the year of 1968, when stratosphere balloons were entering Soviet territory from Iran. That was under the old Shah's government, and I'm sure they carried interesting contents, those balloons. Well, the balloons flew in as a group, carried by an airstream, and at the same altitude, discarded their ballasts, gained another altitude, entered another stream, and returned to Iran. There, the reconnaissance data was collected. Soviet MiG-17 regiment was stationed at the Kizil Arvat airfield in the Soviet Turkmenistan. Now, aircraft we know as MiG-17 in those years did not fly at the altitude of 15,000 meters. Akimenkov at the time was in the town of Mari. He and two other aviators were ordered to shoot down one such stratosphere balloon. Akimenkov's aircraft weapons consist of 32 unguided rockets. His colleagues Zvezdin and Zhuravlev had guided rockets of various types. The difficulty of the task before them was the hydrogen that filled the balloon. If the hydrogen exploded, they would be doomed. Their goal was to shoot down the capsule. They were flying towards it in the evening with the sun behind them. They noticed the gray stratosphere balloon at the altitude of approximately 17,500, 18,000 meters. Akimenkov noticed to the left of the balloon another object, shaped like an automobile tire, similar to the balloon in size, but its color was blue. Not glossy, it was more like foggy blue. The test pilot was concerned with the evasion of burning hydrogen and did not perceive that it was a UFO. His full attention was on the capsule, so he did not look at the UFO when he opened fire. Akimenkov hit the capsule and the balloon immediately jumped up. The test pilot turned his aircraft around to see the results of his firing and saw that the UFO flew away to a distance of 10 kilometers. But before, it was from 300 to 500 meters at the distance from the balloon. So that is very close to him. The order not to shoot at UFOs was disobeyed one last time, as far as I know, in the summer of 1981, during the Afghan war. Leaked reports from the USSR told the story that in August of that year, a gigantic UFO appeared over the Air Defense Regiment of the Soviet 12th Army of the Air Defense Forces. The area is so close to the Iranian border in the Turkmen town of Kizil Arbat, also pronounced as Gizil Arbat. Today, the name of the town is Serdar. It is located northwest of the capital Ashgabat, on the road to the Caspian Sea. The Soviets were vigilant and nervous because Saddam Hussein's forces were fighting the Iranian Ayatollah's armies. The strange elliptical object hovered at an altitude of 7 kilometers. Two MiG-27 jets were dispatched after it. The UFO slowly and noiselessly moved in the direction of the north. The radar registered it without any problems. The captain who flew the leading interceptor told his ground control that he had the UFO in sight. An order from the ground control ordered him to fire 2 missiles at the target. The UFO disappeared at a great speed, but it was not alone. The leading interceptor and the missiles it fired vanished instantly. No traces of the plane or its missiles were ever found on the ground. Another confirmation of this incident is found in Vadim Chernobrov's book «Над пропастью нераскрытых тайн». It was published in Moscow in 1997. I think it could be translated as «Over the Abyss of the Unsolved Mysteries». And Vadim Chernobrov was one of the best Soviet and Russian UFO researchers. A young man, a scientist, very determined. He created a UFO research organization which became international. He passed away some years ago, and it was a blow to Russian ufology. Well, the UFO in question was sighted at the altitude of 7 kilometers. It was shaped like a cigar. Its size approximately 100 to 200 meters. A special commission investigated the incident. It confirmed all facts in the report prepared by the regiment's commander. As a result, This commander was demoted because he issued orders without asking his superiors. And there was a confirmation in the Russian newspaper in 1992. Anyway, the commission did not accept his arguments that the sighting took place so close to the Iranian border, just like 100 kilometers. And so he had to fire. Now let's look at the Iranian-Soviet border in the year of 1985. Alexei Smirnov, engineer and former Soviet military officer, revealed several interesting UFO sightings in an interview with the Ukrainian newspaper Nasha Gazeta. It was in December of 1999. It was a great interview because it provided some missing pieces to my research and showed a tremendous basically panorama of the Soviet UFO incidents and military involvement. This incident took place on August 17, 1985. At 3 o'clock at night, reports came into the headquarters from the testing areas that numerous objects, crosses, rings, and bright dots appeared in the sky. The officer on duty, Lieutenant Colonel Valentin Khan, issued orders to photograph the objects. There were altogether 11 kilometers of film that was shot, film of the objects that they were shooting. The orders to the units were to develop the film and write a report about the incident. Lieutenant Colonel Pyotr Meleshchuk was in charge of the project. He resided in Nezhin, Ukraine at the time of the interview, and Lieutenant Colonel Alim Ustimenko, responsible for the technical portion of the project, resided in Lokhvitsa, Ukraine. There were 30 illustrations in the report. Several types of the objects were registered. The main one was a huge white cross against dark sky. It had 2 crossing bars, each 800 meters long. It hovered in the sky for a long time and then disappeared as if into thin air. Now the other group of objects consisted of rings, 7 white rings visible against the dark sky. They moved about all the time. 2 of the rings flew parallel course, and then the smaller was immersed into the larger, and what remained was only 1 ring. The third group of objects consisted of bright dots. Strong light emitted from a bright dot in the sky and diffused like in a cone-like manner. The light was very intensive and did not abate anywhere along the radiance or luminescence. This report, like other such reports, were sent to Moscow. Smirnov and his colleagues made no further inquiries. The Cold War was in full swing, and they were trying to create new missile technology for their country. Who knows what hovered over Soviet testing ranges and facilities? Perhaps UFOs, perhaps enemy intelligence equipment. The Soviets did observe that, as a rule, strange objects had appeared right before new missile tests. This is something interesting I want to tell you. When the Ukrainian was asked about his opinion as to the nature of UFOs, Smirnov replied that he is an engineer, a materialist, and he is against anything mystical. He was certain that the alien intelligence exists. He also knew that our current level of knowledge did not allow us to communicate with them. He said, one can fantasize as much as possible, but that is how things are now. Smirnov often observed rockets piercing the ozone layer of the atmosphere and harsh cosmic radiation entering the air. It was a stunning spectacle. Half of the sky was taken by waves of blinding white color. We feel pride, but do we really understand what happens at the moment? Maybe our experiments cause pain to an alien intelligence that coexists with us in some other dimension, said Smirnov. Similar to how a human being would feel pain if a nail pierced his skin. So they send objects to us in order to understand who we are, what we want, and why do we do what we do, surmised former Soviet military engineer Smirnov. And just to end this video, I want to say that Russia and Iran have jointly begun to study UFOs observed over Iran in 2005. It was a period of high intensity and UFOs in the region and over Iran. Of course, we do not know what happened with this study. I'm sure it's kept in secret. But it's a very interesting territory to keep your eyes on. You know that I have more videos about Central Asia and UFOs, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and actually some other incidents, including the 1978 one. And I urge you to look at my videos and study them. Please subscribe, please tell others, because as you know, UFOs don't just visit the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and we have to compare cases. If you like my research, again, I ask that you please support me. You have the PayPal link or Patreon, and subscribe like I said before, and I appreciate all your attention and will do my best to bring more interesting videos. Thank you.